Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. Welcome to the channel. This is Roger Thunder. I want to talk about gift giving and bartering and financing and the debt system and the financial system, things like that. It's funny what led me into this. The other day I was sitting around and for some reason I thought of that term, Indian giver. You're an Indian giver. And I thought, how did the Indians get involved in a term that's basically derogatory but has great meaning still? And that is, most interpretation of that term would mean, giving something to somebody and then giving a gift to somebody and then taking it back. That basically is what that brings to mind, the term Indian giver. But upon research of that, which I always do, I like to do a deep dive into the origins of sayings and things of that nature. I come up with the origins of that being, again, here we go with the Mayflower again, and the people coming over on the Mayflower. And having meals and sitting down with the natives of this land. Eventually what arose was an exchange happening, And so the exchange was sometimes the natives would give the pilgrims food or blankets or any number of things. They would just give that to them, or let's say that was what was thought. Okay, and here's the rub on that. The European man didn't have a concept of bartering, is what it amounted to. They didn't have a concept other than the fact of their currency, gold, or whatever their currency was at the time. That was their bartering, or that was their financial system. So when the natives gave things, or let's say offered things, that would be a better term, offered things to the pilgrims, they expected an exchange, an equal and fair exchange of something in return. Well, when the pilgrims found this out, they freaked out and said, no, you're supposed to be, they didn't understand the bartering system, and you're giving us a gift and we don't have to give you anything in return. You're in India. You're an Indian that gives and wants something in return or wants to take back the gift or whatever. When in reality, it was just a matter of the honest-hearted natives of this land doing what they considered bartering or giving, let's say, one thing for another, a food item or a blanket, and receiving something that they could use of equal value, or didn't even necessarily have to be of equal value, just something in return. So that's where that misconcept came about, and then later on that was embellished upon was used, okay, somehow it evolved into other things, all right, and even for a while it took on the opposite connotation of what happened to the natives. This is real Indian giving. What happened to the natives when the whites came over here with treaties, had them sign treaties and promised all kinds of things, land, and all kinds of things promised to them, and then that wasn't kept. So in effect, the white man was the Indian giver, or he gave to the Indians, but he didn't. So I wanted to clear up that whole thing about that term Indian giver. Shouldn't be Indian giver at all. Here's another thing that the natives did as far as gift giving goes. Yes, they did bartering, right? They offered items in exchange, even with each other. But there was also another concept that they believed in, and that was giving of gifts without any expectation of any return whatsoever, just giving the person a gift. There's a famous term called the giveaway, okay, and that is a situation where natives give gifts to those in need and don't expect anything in return. In fact, they give so much gifts, they might give their half their household or whatever, items. And in that regard, okay, when the natives gave a gift, we have high principles at work here, which the white man doesn't understand, has lost sight of, or whatever. When a gift was given, the people, the natives that gave the gift, would see the person they gave it to and would watch that person to see if that gift was really appreciated, okay? And the way that they could tell if that gift was appreciated was if the person used that gift. If they used the gift, let's just take a simple example, like let's say a tomahawk was given to somebody, or a bow. And the person that received the bow, the person that received the bow, or the tomahawk, let's say, just stuck it in their belt, never used it, just figured like, oh, this is just an ornament, or they hung it on their wall and just said it's something to look at. It's a little prize I have that somebody gave me. That was not a using of the gift as it should have been. And so in cases like that, the person might even go up and say, hey, you're not using that gift. I see you're not using it. How about returning it, and I'll give it to somebody that does want to use it, because they were very productive. Let's say the native mind was everything should be put to good use, just like when they butchered the buffalo and used every part of it, every single part of it for their life, something in their life. Bones for weapons, furs for warmth, that type of thing. So anyway, that clears up the misconception of what supposed an Indian giver is, all right? It can work all kinds of ways, and the term Indian really shouldn't even be in there. What it should be is, are you a giver, a false giver, all right? Do you give falsely? Do you give for nefarious reasons, for control or whatever? Is it really a gift? There's high principles at work here, very, very high principles that should be adhered to, even in this day and age, in this lifetime. So that sprungboarded me off into another direction, just the financial system as a whole, and how we got into this mess, and how there's a term, follow the money, right? So, if you want to understand why the world is in a mess right now, on all fronts, I'm talking about morality and everything, the way you do that is you follow the money. And when you follow the money, you find out that it's, you have to look into how the financial system works in America. Let's just take America, for example, and how it originated and all this good shit. So if you go back to the bartering, let's go back to the bartering. How it was meant to be, actually, was exchanging one good for another. Here, I got a chicken, how about giving me a wolf skin? Or I got this and you can give me that. And so that was the original way of, if you want to call it that, a financial, only it wasn't financial, it had nothing to do with money. It had to do with giving and receiving. The basics of giving and receiving. So when the white man came over, they instituted a thing called farming at some point, and even tried to get the natives to farm on a massive level, not just growing their own food. And farming became instituted and things of that nature. And the next thing you know, instead of just having a small plot of land with some corn and whatever other food you might grow on that, instead of having it got into acres and acres of land and all kinds of corn or wheat or whatever you were growing on it. And then as civilization, again, here's that word civilization, as uncivilization grew, what happened is that somebody came up with the bright idea that we're going to take, you can give me your chicken or you can give me your wolf skin or whatever. And I got all this corn over here and I grew a whole bunch of corn and I got some in storage. And so why don't you take this piece of paper, which a note which represents that corn, and you could just come and get it any time you want. You know, if you don't need corn now, okay, that's cool. But if you need it later, you can bring the note in, and we will give you the amount of corn that is indicated on that note. A piece of paper is what we're talking about here. So immediately we jumped into the actual energy of the material thing into an energy of a piece of paper. And then they would add on things like, this is how the monetary system was born. Then they would add on things like, we really would like you to not wait too long for you to redeem your piece of paper for the corn. So what we might institute is some kind of little extra, what they later came up with was the word tax. We'll tax that, an interest rate, or whatever. And then it evolved into all kinds of other different activities. Store up a bunch of pieces of paper, and it will gather interest. That, you know, it worked both ways. So that basically instituted the monetary system, the banking system, and then as governments grew, you had to have an oversight, which was like a central bank that watched all these other little guys that were loaning their pieces of paper to, and somehow infuse their input. They somehow needed to have control. That's how it all got out of hand, all right? It all got out of hand. And as civilization grew further, what you had were people that, instead of trading goods and services, they would work for the certain person, and that certain person would give them these green frog skins, as Lame Deer called them, the green frog skins, the pieces of paper, which they could go redeem somewhere. And this was known as the productivity cycle, where the people that produced the goods made money, and the ones that worked for the people that produced the goods made money. And one hand kind of washed the other, and there was kind of an equal balance, okay? It was kind of an equal balance where both were happy, the person that was the producer and the person that helped them produce, the worker, that allowed them to have productivity. It all worked out hunky-dory, everybody was happy, but at some point, as greed set in, and the inevitable greed and grasping of power, and this and that, and I'm making a long story short here, what we ended up with was the workers getting paid less, and the people that they were working for were making more money, and the workers ended up making less money, kind of like a slave-oriented debt system. a slave-oriented debt system. Let's not forget this was all instituted by the white man or the European man who came over here and basically messed everything up, okay, as far as being more natural, being more personable, being, I'll give you this gift and you give me that, or I'll offer you this in exchange for that. It got way out of hand, and it got out of the control of the people and went into the control of the so-called quote-unquote powers to be or government. So that's what you have going on right now. Now let me take this a step further into how this is affecting the situation that we live in today as regards to the debt-based system and how everybody seems to be under the gun and what kind of effects this debt-based system produces as far as world conditions. Well, that same debt-based system was extrapolated upon and expanded to where this one nation, the United States, based their system on what they called the petrodollar and got rid of the original minerals of gold that backed up any kind of paper. Remember, paper represents whatever. So basically, they went off the gold standard, Nixon did, and back in the Vietnam War days, and they based everything on petroleum and oil. Excuse me. And when they did that, it became more illusory because it really wasn't based on the original solid gold backing or silver backing or whatever. And then when they switched to this petrodollar, they pulled the same thing on the nations or other people in other nations that they did with this whole system that I just described about debt. We'll give you this amount of piece of paper, and we'll bail you out, and we'll help your country. And in exchange, you will pay us like a huge interest rate. And then they also went into the concept of other people buying our debt through treasury bonds, supporting the fact that we had a debt. It became totally out of control, people. Totally out of control. So this hegemon, or this big bully called America that pulled all this crap on the natives of this land, we're now expanding it out beyond the borders in other lands, okay? And next thing you know, their little financial system was expanded, with them being at the head of the class, was expanded out throughout all the nations. And so basically what happened is what you see happening today. And then to further support this ludicrous, insane idea, you can throw wars into the mix, and you can throw the military-industrial complex. Here we have another producer, right? Productivity. And then from there, at some point, this whole system went into an oligarchy where a few people at the top that had the most money and the most land and the most resources and the most green frog skins started controlling the monetary system, the central banks, and the overlord of all these little bartering banks and people and farmers and all that stuff. So you had an oligarch, or let's say a big bully would be a better term, who eventually took over even what was known as the American state. Fueled by other countries and an alliance with other countries, it just got totally out of hand. Now let's fast forward a little bit more and find out that this whole system that they devised, the whole financial system, because they didn't adhere to the proper principles of the equality of the let's say, slave labor, getting paid as much and having it be an equal thing as the people that were producing. When that went south, when the people working in this land, okay, the worker, the American worker, isn't getting, wages haven't been raised since what? In equality with the productivity for probably 20, 30 years. So what happens is you get a further and further debt-based society. Next thing you know, you're not living on the paper at all. You're living on an imagined debt. And so what this amounts to is that the system at some point, because it wasn't well-oiled and it got out of hand and people got greedy and weren't worried about their debt or the debt that they were accruing or their productivity, it just basically got so out of hand that now we're at like trillions of dollars, what, 40 trillion close to, or there's all kinds of estimates that this big machine got in debt and it's losing its power, and other countries around the world are going, hey, wait a minute, this looks like it's collapsing, so why don't we form our own more just financial system? And the reason that they wanted to do this is because they were getting sanctioned if they were naughty boys or girls and didn't adhere to certain rules that this original hegemon, the United States of America, was imposing upon them. So what we're seeing today is a collapse of the system, which in a way would be really good, because that would kind of be a natural jubilee. And there's, the jubilee was in several religions where every 7 years or every so many years, anybody that owned a debt of any kind in that society would be forgiven that debt, and everybody got a clean slate and they got to start all over again. And so that equalized this power hold, okay, that equalized the power hold that this oligarch class or this financial class might have over the people. So it was a spiritual type of concept, metaphysical, spiritual type of concept, where there's just too much overload here, there's too much inequality, there's things are getting out of balance, and other people are taking advantage of these people. So all debt is forgiven. All debt is forgiven. And everybody gets to start over, and the slate is wiped clean. And so if a collapse happens, that's basically going to be the same effect of the slate being wiped clean, only it's going to be a forced situation. Shocking. To them anyway, because there will, at that point, there will be everything will be so in the toilet that I don't care how technologically advanced you are, if people can't pay and they can't pay and the system collapses and you lose track of all the people that were owed before, and let's say computers could even be wiped clean. All of a sudden you're back to square one again as far as the slate being wiped clean. That's what's happening right now, and they know that's what's happening. And so a splatter effect of that is the horrible situation that you see them getting desperate, trying to salvage something they can't, through war, basically. And that's a whole nother long story that I don't want to go into here right now. But that's why we have war. That's why we have a decay of morality. That's why we have a decay of honest natural law and earth-based alliances and systems, and the Native American view, or the native view in America of that's just gone. Okay, and so we are going to go back to square one here at some point. There will be no more debt. But it's going to be a collapsed, instead of a voluntary thing, it's going to be, oh wow, it just happens overnight. Okay, and that, again, that has shocking consequences. So I think I'm going to keep this video short, under 30 minutes. I hope I encapsulated something there for the people out there and the ones in the prayer circle, the Red Road Prayer Circle, which you can go to and at spiritofcrazyhorse.com in the show notes below. Also, donations are appreciated to keep this work going. And then that takes us right back to gift giving or bartering, because I'm offering you my wisdom in exchange for something in return. Okay, so if you want to go by that principle, you can donate. At spiritofcrazyhorse.com, over to the right, there's a donate button. So until then, I guess I'll just leave it there, keeping the video short. Wopila, thank you, and